Please watch the video until the end to experience the full arc of this story and its heartfelt resolution. Chapter 1. The Misplaced Letter. She remembered the night Jonah first texted the wrong number because it happened in the small window between summer and senior year, when the town smelled like cut grass and possibility. The narrator, someone who had watched them both grow up, saw Clara standing under the porch light, phone clutched like a warm stone, reading a message meant for someone else. The sender's words sounded like a confession, worried, unmoored, full of a boy's ache. He signed it simply, Jonah. Clara had never intended to answer. She had been practiced at not making a scene, at withdrawing into the well of her own cleverness instead of stepping forward. But something in his voice, texted, shy, oddly literary, pierced the distance she kept between herself and strangers. She typed back one line, "Are you okay?" That single text began the conversation that would bend their lives. Jonah, small-town handsome in a way that didn't try too hard, confessed his confusion about college, his fear that he wasn't enough for the bright future people expected of him. Clara, who spent evenings solving for proofs and translating poetry into jokes, replied with honesty that felt dangerous. They traded fragments, playlists, bad jokes, the names of books that had quietly saved them. None of it was visible to the rest of the world. It was made only for two glowing rectangles and the person behind one. The narrator watched all of it like a guardian and a voyeur. She knew the gentle escalation that happens when two people who need someone find one another by accident and decide, in a kind of brave rebellion, to belong. Chapter 2. The Voice in the Middle. But life in a small high school rarely respects the privacy of texts or the protective armor of anonymity. During a late-night study session, Clara's best friend Mara came over with a laugh that made the room feel bigger. Mara wore her confidence like a coat. Warm, bright, impossible to ignore. She teased Clara about the tone of the messages she read aloud, and when Mara asked to meet Jonah in person as a joke, Clara's chest tightened. It was not a malicious plan. It was a holiday ornament of compromise. Mara offered to meet Jonah and say the things Clara was too afraid to say aloud. She would use Clara's words, speak with her cadence, and let the two strangers fall in love with the persona Clara had carefully assembled in ink and pixels. If Jonah liked her, the story went, then she could step in later and claim the truth. In Clara's mind, the deception was a bridge she would burn behind her once she reached the other side. The narrator could see how the rationalizations stacked up. She also felt every small alarm, the dishonesty, the unequal power of bodies and voices. The way Mara's way of moving through rooms would always be different from Clara's, yet the pull of feeling wanted, of hearing "I like you" in return was strong enough to drown the warning bells. So the plan moved forward, tentative and hopeful. Chapter 3. Masks and Mirrors. When Mara met Jonah at a coffee shop, she did not try to copy Clara exactly. She wore Clara's jokes like a borrowed sweater and turned Jonah's nervous laughter into a private crown. The narrator observed Jonah soften in a way that made the air between them feel as if it could be cut with a spoon. He said the things he'd typed, awkward but honest, and Mara said them back with the kind of ease only someone used to attention can manage. The charade worked because truth, when softened by kindness, often looks authentic. Jonah left the meeting with a new brightness. He thanked Mara in a voice that later replayed in Clara's head, and the narrator felt the first seeds of regret take root in Clara's chest. She had been the source of Jonah's words. She had given him an inner map, but the compass now pointed to someone else. Love began not with fireworks, but with confession and companionship. Jonah and Clara continued their nightly messages. Clara typing, Mara sometimes answering in person. The narrator watched as the two young people fell for attributes that belonged partly to Clara, partly to their own projections. It was an uneven mirror. Each side reflected what they wanted to see. Chapter 4, The Unraveling Secrecy, has the particular gravity of a lie. It bends toward discovery. The first crack appeared in a photograph. Jonah, excited and earnest, posted a picture of Mara and himself from the coffee shop with a caption the narrator could recite now. Something about finding the voice he'd been missing. Clara saw it and felt like an animal pressed up against glass, aware but not part of the world on the other side. Confrontations arrived in slow motion and sudden clarity. Jonah messaged Clara, asking for honesty. The narrator remembers the trembling in Clara's hands as she finally told him the truth about the wrong number that had become a lifeline, about Mara's face in the coffee shop, about how she had thought the deception would be a temporary medicine. He read, and then he didn't respond for hours. He came over that evening with the rain in his hair and a face that had folded into disappointment. What followed was messy and true: hurt, anger, confession, apology. Jonah felt betrayed not only because he'd been deceived, but because he had fallen for a person who chose to hide. Clara felt ashamed because she had traded authenticity for acceptance, and in doing so had severed the very thing she wanted most, to be seen. The narrator, a woman who prized honesty, felt both ache and fierce compassion for them. Chapter 5, Ebb and Mend. They separated like two waves that had once been in phase. Jonah avoided Clara in the hallways. Mara, ashamed and protective, retreated into her brilliant distance. The town hummed with versions of their story, as small towns do, and the narrator watched how reputations knit themselves around new truths. But people who have felt the warmth of being known rarely lose that hunger. Time softened the edges. Clara did what she had always done when the world demanded courage. She made small, visible acts of honesty. She wrote an op-ed for the school paper about fear and identity that read like a small self-salvation. She stopped hiding behind sarcasm and allowed people to see her thoughtful, awkward tenderness. Mara apologized not with performative gestures, but with presence, helping Clara study, sitting with her while she corrected her mistakes. Jonah, reading Clara's words in the paper and in the messages he had once loved, began to remember the honest person he'd first connected with. There was no grand gesture at first, only incremental reconnection, a return text, a shared late-night playlist, a conversation that didn't pretend away the past. The narrator watched these moments like a gardener tracking a plant that, against odds, had not died. Chapter 6, The Shape of Truth. Their reunion was gentle rather than cinematic. Jonah and Clara met on the bleachers one evening, the field below them empty after practice, the lights dimmed. Jonah admitted the ways he had been wounded and the ways he had been unfair. Clara admitted how she had feared being ordinary more than she feared hurting someone she loved. Both of them, finally, allowed themselves to be imperfect. The narrator, who had once only watched, now felt part of the story's architecture. No longer an outside voice, but someone who had learned what they were describing, that worth is not in perfection, but in the capacity to show up and to repair. Jonah kissed Clara not as a prize, but as a thank you for honesty, as an apology for impatience, as a promise to try. They did not arrive at some tidy epilogue. There were hard conversations ahead, promises to rebuild trust, and moments when old fears whispered in their ears. But by choosing truth, even when it cut, they began to get to know one another in a way that was unborrowed and real. The narrator closed her account of them with a sense of hope that felt earned born, not of the magic of serendipity, but of the deliberate, stubborn labor of being known. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the channel, activate notifications, give the video a like, leave a comment, and share the video with others.